At 0600 local time over Timov Oblast, 43 Ukrainian drones were screaming toward the Progress missile factory, the most heavily defended airspace in western Russia. But somewhere west of the factory, buried beneath a set of railroad tracks that feed every supply line to Crimea, something had been waiting for weeks. The Russian crews had no idea they were about to win every single engagement this morning. And that's exactly what Ukraine was counting on. The first contacts appeared on radar at 0604, then 6 more, fanning out across the northern approach in a pattern designed to light up every scope in the corridor simultaneously. UJ-22s, 800-kilometer range, a radar cross-section the size of a large bird. Price tag, $30,000. Cheap, disposable, and about to become the most expensive problem in Russian air defense. The Pantsir's PPI scope, that green rotating sweep you've seen in every submarine movie, was clean. 4 minutes later, the northern arc started blooming with contacts. 8 returns, then 12. The battery commander was already on the tactical net, calling out sectors to the adjacent crews, trying to deconflict targets before 2 batteries wasted missiles on the same drone, or worse, both assumed the other one had it. Who shoots what? And who holds fire? That coordination problem gets harder with every new contact on the scope. And by 0604, there were more contacts than batteries to assign them to. The Zu-23 crew spotted them first. At treetop altitude, radar has to fight ground clutter for every return, but the human eye doesn't. The gunners heard them before they saw them, that high-pitched lawnmower buzz carrying across the frozen fields. Then shapes appeared over the tree line, gray airframe, barely bigger than a dining table, skimming the canopy at 200 clicks, or about 125 miles per hour. At that speed and altitude, each one was visible for maybe 5 seconds before it was past your position and someone else's problem. The gun crews were tracking on iron sights and muscle memory while the Pantsir radars were still sorting contacts from ground scatter. The Pantsir S-1 you see here is Russia's answer to the drone swarm, a mobile system carrying 48 TKB-1055 mini missiles at $170,000 each. Think of it as the most expensive fly swatter ever built. In seconds, the 92 N6E search radar, that rotating dish on top, scans the sky in 3-second sweeps, painting everything within 30 kilometers. The moment it tags a contact, the system hands it to the 10ES-1E fire control radar, the smaller fixed array underneath, which locks the target with millimeter precision and calculates an intercept solution. From first detection to missile launch, 14 seconds. Faster than most people can parallel park. But that's under ideal conditions. The UJ-22s were coming in at treetop level, which means their radar returns were blending with ground clutter. Buildings, tree lines, terrain, features all bouncing signal back at the same frequencies. At those altitudes, the search radar's effective detection range drops from 30 kilometers to roughly 12, and the fire control array has to filter a drone's signature from the noise of the earth beneath it. It's like trying to hear someone whispering your name in a crowded restaurant. At 0605, the first TKB-1055 left the rail, crossed 3 kilometers of airspace, and turned 30 grand worth of Ukrainian drone into confetti. Second UJ-22 down. Third, 12 seconds later, down. The system was doing exactly what Moscow paid billions for it to do. The only problem was Russia was spending a Porsche to shoot down a go-kart. And when the math is that lopsided, the side with go-karts doesn't need to win a single engagement. They just need to keep showing up. 48 missiles in the tubes at 0600, 31 by 0610, 19 by 0615. The UJ-22s were arriving from multiple vectors now: north, northeast, northwest, staggering just far enough apart that each battery had to engage them one at a time. 6 seconds per engagement. Detect, classify, decide, fire. Then do it again while the magazine counter ticks down like a shot clock. A Pantsir covering the northern sector tracked 2 UJ-22s simultaneously. Fired on the closer one, watched the second glide untouched toward the factory. The battery east had 8 rounds left and 3 contacts of its own. The corridor was hemorrhaging missiles faster than it was taking out drones, and every crew in the network knew it. And they were playing right into Ukraine's trap. 200 kilometers east, a fuel train was scheduled to roll through Kochetovka 2 that afternoon. The air defense crews didn't know it, but they weren't just protecting a factory. They were protecting the only thing keeping a phone under those tracks from ringing. And reloading wasn't an option. A Pantsir can't swap magazines in a field the way a soldier swaps a rifle clip. It needs a dedicated Kamaz transport loader truck, a crew of 4, and roughly 20 minutes with the system completely offline. Radar dark, launch rails exposed, the vehicle's defenseless. Even if resupply was staged behind them, the moment a crew starts reloading, they're a sitting duck with 65 tons of missile fuel bolted to the chassis. In the middle of an active swarm, going offline for 20 minutes is the same as going offline permanently. As the drone kept coming, one question kept coming up from the Russians. Why? Unknown to them, the drone doesn't need to survive. It needs to be seen. Its radar cross-section is tuned to sit right in the Pantsir's detection sweet spot. Visible enough to trigger an automatic lock, slow enough to guarantee a full engagement cycle. That's not a design flaw, that's the entire point. A stealthier drone might slip through, but it wouldn't drain the magazine on its way. As the Pantsers fired away, Zu-23 gun trucks scrambled to fill the gaps. Twin autocannons bolted to a flatbed, 800 rounds per minute, effective out to about 2.5 kilometers. The engagement geometry was brutal. A UJ-22 at treetop level going 200 clicks gives the gunner maybe a 4-second window, and holding a lead on it is about the same as trying to shoot a garbage bag blowing across a highway. One caught a UJ-22 head-on and shredded it. Another burned 40 seconds of sustained fire to clip a wing, barrels glowing cherry red. Those barrels are rated for about 600 rounds before the steel starts warping, and 40 seconds of sustained fire blows past that in the first 15. After 2 engagements, the gun is either shooting crooked or needs to cool down before it cooks off a round in the chamber. By 0620, 12 UJ-22s down, over $2 million in ordnance spent. Total damage to Ukraine, $360,000. Every engagement was technically perfect. Strategically, it was a catastrophe. Then at 0625, new signatures pushed through the UJ-22 screen. Faster, higher, heavier radar returns. These weren't just decoys on lawnmower engines. AN-196 Lyuty's 1,000-kilometer range, 75-kilogram warhead, enough to flatten a factory floor. And here's the detail that turns this from a bad morning into a masterpiece of operational planning. These weren't launched at the same time as the decoys. Ukraine launched the Lyuty's first, hours earlier, from airfields deep inside Ukrainian territory. The decoys launched second, from staging areas much closer to the border. The decoys had less distance to cover, so despite being slower, they arrived first. The Lyuty's, faster but with hundreds of extra kilometers to fly, arrived 20 minutes behind them. Walking through an empty corridor the decoys had already drained. That kind of synchronization across hundreds of kilometers of airspace doesn't happen by accident. Someone with a college degree worked out exactly how many UJ-22s it would take to exhaust the Pantsers, added a margin, and built the entire operation around a magazine counter hitting 0 at the right moment. 15 kilometers out, the first Lyuty was closing at 190 knots, 12 kilometers. A second appeared on the scope, hugging terrain from the southwest. 10 kilometers, a third. The Pantsir crews saw them coming and did the math nobody trained you for. One crew tracked a Lyuty for 6 seconds without firing. 3 missiles left. Another Lyuty right behind it. A third closing from the southwest. They let the first one through. Watched 75 kilograms of high explosives sail toward the factory with nothing between it and the target except air. They let it go because the alternative was worse. Fire the last 3 missiles and sit empty while the rest of the morning happened around them. Down the corridor, another crew faced the same equation. 2 missiles, 3 contacts. They fired once, connected. The second Lyuty sailed past. The third didn't even get tracked. Every battery was making the same impossible choice: shoot and go dry, or hold and watch a warhead fly past your position toward the thing you're supposed to protect. Then at 0635, a Lyuty pushing toward the factory, GPS locked, course steady, started drifting. Not battle damage, not a malfunction. The coordinates on its flight computer sliding sideways 3 degrees off, then 10. Another Lyuty, different vector, same drift. A third stopped responding to its flight plan entirely and drove itself into a plowed field at 200 kilometers per hour. No rounds fired, no intercepts, no sound at all. just contacts drifting off the scopes and vanishing one by one. Something was out there that didn't use ammunition, didn't generate a radar signature, and had been running since before the first UJ-22 ever crossed the border. The R-330ZH Zhitel you see here doesn't look like much. A Ural truck with a trailer full of antennas, parked near the factory since before dawn. No missiles, guns, or moving parts visible from the outside. But this truck had done more damage to Ukraine's strike package on a tank of diesel than every Pantsir in the corridor had done with a warehouse full of missiles. The Zhitel is a broadband jammer, and it basically suffocates GPS signals. A GPS signal starts at a satellite 20,000 kilometers above the Earth and arrives at a drone's antenna with about 20 watts of power, roughly the strength of a car headlight seen from the other side of the planet. That signal is carrying the timing data the drone needs to calculate its exact position, and it has to arrive clean, with nanosecond precision, or the math falls apart. The Zhitel doesn't try to decode that signal or outsmart it, it just shouts over it, flooding everything from 100 megahertz to 2 gigahertz with broadband static across a 30-kilometer radius. Every navigation frequency inside that bubble, GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, disappears under a wall of noise. Think less sniper rifle, more fire hose. And here's the critical part. A drone inside the bubble doesn't just lose its signal, it gets a signal that lies to it. Ghost coordinates that have nothing to do with the ground below, fed to a computer that has no way of knowing it's being deceived. And it wasn't just drones feeling the effects. Cell service near Michurinsk has been spotty for months. 88,000 civilians blaming their carrier. They didn't know a phone under a set of railroad tracks 5 kilometers west was blaming the same truck. Every drone that had survived the Pantsirs and the gun trucks flew into that bubble and lost its mind. Inside each drone, its GPS receiver starts getting timing data corrupted by microseconds, tiny errors that compound into massive position jumps. The solution drifts 50 meters east, then snaps 200 meters north, then back again. The autopilot chases each phantom waypoint, correcting and overcorrecting, and every adjustment takes it further from the real flight path. The drone doesn't know it's lost. Its instruments say everything is normal. That's what makes jamming so much more lethal than a missile. It doesn't break the computer. It convinces the computer everything is fine while it flies into the ground. A Lyuty, the heavy hitter Ukraine spent the entire morning protecting, drifted 11 degrees off course, corrected toward a coordinate that didn't exist, and plowed into a tree line 6 kilometers from anything worth hitting. $250,000 in strike drone turned to scrap by a truck burning 40 liters of diesel fuel an hour. Inside the Zhitel, the operators had been watching the jamming drone work flawlessly for 50 minutes. Every contact that entered the bubble drifted, every single one. The system was performing exactly as designed. But at 0645, specific Lyutys held course. No drift, no deviation. The Zhitel was screaming across every frequency, and these drones weren't flinching because they weren't listening. On the Zhitel's monitoring equipment, the operators could see their jamming broadcasting at full power. The drones just weren't responding. Contacts holding steady, heading west, straight at them. Something they'd never seen before was inbound, and they had no weapon to answer it with. On board each sat a Skynode S flight computer, and this is where the entire Russian defensive concept breaks down. Most drones navigate the way you use Google Maps, follow GPS coordinates turn by turn, no thinking required. Get out of the signal, the drone is lost. The Skynode doesn't work that way. It navigates by camera, matching the ground below to satellite imagery in real time, reading roads and rivers and tree lines the way a bush pilot reads landmarks through the cockpit window. Before launch, the drone's memory is loaded with a strip map of satellite photos along its entire flight path. In flight, the downward-facing camera compares what it sees to what it expects to see, calculating position from visual features with no external signal required. Inertial measurement units backing it up underneath. Gyroscopes and accelerometers dead reckoning off the drone's own momentum, corrected by the camera every few seconds. You can't jam a camera. You can't drown out a gyroscope. These drones flew 30 kilometers of broadband jamming the way a deaf man walks through a rock concert. The entire Russian electronic warfare doctrine is built on the assumption that drones need satellites to see. The Skynode doesn't. And they weren't heading for the factory. On the scopes, their course lines were converging 5 kilometers west, something else entirely. 8 kilometers out, the nearest Pantsir was dry, nothing left in the tubes. The gun trucks were 10 clicks east, 8 minutes from a flight that would be over in 90 seconds. 6 kilometers. 5. A single contact holding perfect course through 30 kilometers of noise. No drifting, no deviating. The Zhitel operators just watched 30 drones get lost inside their jamming bubble. These drones flew right through it like it was free Wi-Fi. 3 kilometers. The Zhitel had been broadcasting its position across the electromagnetic spectrum for 55 minutes. Ukraine had the coordinates loaded before the drones ever launched. The operatives who'd buried that phone had done their part weeks ago. Now the only thing between them and a completed circuit was a truck with an antenna. 2 kilometers. The Skynode's cameras locked the truck chassis. Exact match to reference imagery. At this range, the flight computer transitioned from terrain matching to target recognition. The camera stopped comparing landscape features and started searching for a specific shape. The truck, the trailer, the antenna arrays. One-to-one match against imagery loaded before takeoff. The most offensive air defense asset in the Tambov corridor had 30 kilometers of range and 0 weapons to shoot back with. 75 kilograms of warhead, 4 seconds out. At 06:58, the Zhitel came apart, 75 kilograms into the Ural chassis and the trailer behind it, antenna arrays folding into the blast, and 30 kilometers of broadband jamming dropped across every frequency. Not gradually, all at once, like flipping a switch. GPS snapped clean, GLONASS locked on, navigation lines across the corridor straightened like compass needles swinging north. The factory now stood wide open, Pantsir spent, jamming gone. A follow-up wave would have hit unopposed, the easiest strike of the entire war. But the drones didn't come. The Russians sat there in their vehicles and guns for what seemed like an eternity. Where were the Ukrainians going? The surviving drones had just flown right past the factory. After kicking rocks for 30 minutes, they decided to stand down, giddy that they had thought they had won. But they had really played right into Ukraine's hand. They wouldn't be smiling by the end of the day. Because somewhere under a set of railroad tracks, a phone had just found its first bar of service in months, and a fuel train was now on its way. At 15:30 that afternoon, a fuel train rolled into Kochetovka-2, the classification yard 5 kilometers west of the factory where Moscow-Voronezh Rostov main line narrows into a single choke point. Everything feeding Crimea and the southern front squeezes through this yard. When it stops, 3 frontline divisions stop eating. 16 tank cars, 11 gasoline, 5 compressed gas. Buried in the ballast beneath the rails sat a device that had been there for weeks. A cell phone wired to a detonator, invisible from the surface, waiting for one thing: a single bar of service. One successful connection to the nearest cell tower. That's all a phone-triggered IED needs. Not a call that has to be answered, just a signal strong enough to complete a handshake. For months, it couldn't get one. Cell service near Michurinsk had been terrible since the Zhitel set up shop. Calls dropping, texts stuck in outboxes. The kind of thing 88,000 people blamed their carrier and forgot about. But it was never a carrier problem. The Zhitel's jamming doesn't read uniforms. That wall of noise from 100 megahertz to 2 gigahertz buries everything. GPS, GLONASS, and every cellular band a phone needs to reach a tower. GSM 900, GSM 1800, LTE, it all goes down inside the bubble, including a phone under a set of railroad tracks at the Kochetovka-2. At 06:58 that morning, the Zhitel became a bonfire and the bubble popped. It wasn't just GPS that came back. Every cellular band across 30 kilometers opened for the first time in months. At 15:34, someone placed a call. The rail cracked beneath the 4th car and the train started folding. Cars leaving tracks in sequence, couplers wrenching apart. The whole consists jackknifing at 60 kilometers per hour. Tank walls ruptured on impact. 11 cars of gasoline found open air. The fireball climbed 1,000 feet over Michurinsk. Smoke rolling across the countryside for kilometers. Heat so intense, it pushed firefighters back from the perimeter before containment was ever possible. The single-track choke point feeding Crimea and the southern front shut down, and the supply line for 3 frontline divisions stopped moving. The entire operation, 43 drones, 58 minutes, millions of dollars. All of it was to get that one bar of cell service to a device under a rail line. If you like this video, then we think you'll love this one of Ukraine blowing up a dam. Bye for now.